It looks like we have an update on the backstage altercation between Britt Baker and MJF, as MJF in a new interview has shed a lot of light on what went down, his perspective, and what he has to make of all of the reports about this alleged backstage incident. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what Max had to say and break down what it could mean for the future. We're also gonna talk about a major update courtesy of FightfulSelect.com about AEW running a stadium show right here in the United States. So much to get into. We're gonna talk about it right here. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. All right, so last week, we had heard about Britt Baker's suspension due to this alleged backstage altercation that took place at AEW Dynamite 250. That was the show where Will Ospreay and MJF went and had a match for over an hour, or nearly an hour, I should say. And the general gist was that Britt Baker was saying some things about MJF that Alicia Atut heard. Again, this is all alleged, and many reports, according to Fightful and as well as Wrestling Observer, claim that MJF heard about this, and he essentially knocked on the women's locker room to have a conversation with Britt Baker, and in the end, Max apparently walked down the hall, punched a wall. There was frustration. There were a lot of things that were said, apparently, much of which we still don't know, but obviously there was very heated tension in the building that day. Well, MJF had a lot to say about this in a recent interview he did with Cultaholic.com. Here's what he said, quote, "Tell me if this passes the smell test. I barge into a women's locker room. I scream in the face of a 110-pound woman, and then I physically threaten her by punching a wall in her vicinity, and I don't get suspended. Does that pass the smell test to you? Almost everything that was written didn't happen." Went on to say, "Everybody has coworkers at work that they may not get along with. I have a feeling that this was blown out of proportion because all of the English wrestling commentary places that take money off of people like me, who are far more rich and talented and handsome and humble, need clickbait. I can sit here and I can say that wrestling is a competitive, very competitive sport. It breeds a level of insecurity like no other. However, I can easily put over any talent regardless of whether or not I like them as a human being. I can sit here and I can tell you that Britt Baker versus Mercedes Moné at Wembley on August 25th is going to be an epic match we should all be excited to watch. I don't have to like all my coworkers, and that's fine. But yeah, dude, that shit was wild to read, and that is MJF saying that. Britt Baker, of course, has also taken to social media in recent days. She shared a graphic that essentially said something along the lines of "don't believe everything you read," and I think that's kind of what both Britt and Max have kind of been saying, and it's also what I've been saying, to be honest with you, because obviously this incident happened, and the reason that I felt like it was newsworthy to talk about was because Britt Baker was suspended, and that is true. She was suspended for a week or two, and she currently is making her way back on TV. She obviously had that via satellite promo last week, but I think what MJF said there kind of gets to the root of this. There are a lot of people who try to make this out to be MJF barged into the women's locker room, and then he punched a wall, and he said all this stuff, and from all indications, that is not what happened. And he is right. In any company, had he done that, MJF would not be at work the next day. He would not have probably worked that match. But of course, people like to sensationalize this kind of stuff. They like to talk about it, and it's gossip. It's fun. I get it. At the same time, one thing we do also need to remember is these are real people at the end of the day. These are real people that put their bodies on the line for our enjoyment, and that's why I do my best when I'm talking about the newsworthiness of this, right? I do my best to stay away from that. But you have to address it when a talent talks about it, obviously. So what I think, is the real deal here, and what it seems like happened was people had a workplace disagreement. Things got heated. Things were said that probably shouldn't have been said. And a person, in this case, Britt Baker, was reprimanded for it. That stuff happens. There are multiple times where we have all worked with people that we don't like. I have definitely worked with people that I don't particularly get along with, whose opinions I don't agree with, whose views I find reprehensible. That does not mean that you're going to go and fight them. That does not mean you're going to go and do like this kind of stuff. You're going to have those moments where that stuff comes to a head. You're going to have those moments, especially in a locker room, where many things are said, and they're said, very bluntly, especially in a locker room that's close, that these people are together like every single week. You're going to have situations like this where people have disagreements. It happens in WWE too, by the way. The reason we don't hear about it as much and it's not reported as much is because a lot of that stuff is kept on the down low much better in WWE than in AEW, where things just get leaked. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing or whatever. It is just the truth of the matter. So while we sit here, right, and we can discuss, oh my God, they did this, they did that, and Britt Baker called Alicia a toot, whatever. At the same time, I think Max is right in that at the end of the day, both Britt Baker and MJF have essentially moved on from this. And the most important thing, and I think both of them as AEW originals who helped build this brand kind of understand, like, shit happens, you got to move on. And then what did MJF do? He went on to plug that match. He went on to promote the hell out of her match with Mercedes Moné, which is going to be an epic match, let's be honest. So that shows me that at least this was not a thing where, oh man, Max was like ready to punch a wall and all that kind of stuff, like in front of her and like threaten her. I don't think that happened. I think this was a workplace disagreement, an argument that went too far, that did not get physical, it seems like, and stuff happens. Now is the time for MJF and Britt Baker to move on. It seems like they both have, and it's going to be business as usual. It's going to be professional. Doesn't mean they have to work together, but it's going to be professional. So we'll see what happens there, guys. Let me know in the comment section what you guys have to say. I'm sure you have so much to talk about. As we move on to our next and final topic, let's talk about AEW running a stadium show in the United States. This is a big one. So in a follow-up to a recent report from FightfulSelect.com and a recent story that we talked about right here on the channel, looks like AEW is looking to Dallas to eventually run a stadium show next year. Now, the obvious conclusion that many fans have had is, are they going to run AT&T Stadium, the big one where the Cowboys play, where WWE had over 101,000 kayfabe in attendance back in 2016. Real number was closer to like 90,000, but regardless, here is what Fightful Select actually reported on this in a follow-up. Quote, for those asking, Globe Life Stadium is the most likely landing spot or most likely landing point for an AEW Dallas Stadium show. We noted this on the air a while back, but saw people still discussing AT&T Stadium. So, a lot to talk about here, because originally when this news came out and, Dallas, everyone's head went to the biggest place possible. It went to Dallas, like Cowboys Stadium, AT&T Stadium, whatever you want to call it. Where do the big boys play? Or do the Cowboys play in this case? I believe that it is it's good for fans to want that and desire that, but there's also a lot of things we don't see, quite frankly, that go into this kind of stuff. There's site fees. There's the fee for actually running the stadium, because let's be honest, AEW right now, I don't think that they are at the level of WWE in that they can attract the spectacle that WWE has, where places are going to be bidding on them, right? They're probably still going to be doing some sort of deal where they have to pay up front for the stadium costs, and for AT&T Stadium, I'm sure that's high, and when you do that, right, I'm sure they'll get some sort of tax credit that's going to be able to write off a lot of that, and then like the tickets you sell or how much you sell, and you can make money. But there's a lot more that goes into the business side. There's like how can we make this event as profitable as possible? And then there's also the realistic aspect of it. AEW is a company that has struggled to sell tickets this year. That is just true. Like outside of Wembley Stadium, where they're estimated to have 45,000 plus tickets sold, that's a huge amount, by the way. Outside of that, they've largely struggled to sell tickets to their weekly shows. Even for big weekly shows, like Arthur Ashe coming up, their advance is really bad. It's like 3,500 for a show that last year did 1,100 or 11,000. For a show that 3 years ago, at the first ever Arthur Ashe Stadium show, did over 20,000. So they are currently in a rut when it comes to selling tickets. I think part of the calculus has to be that, like, you would ideally want to be in an 80, 90, 100,000 seater. At the same time, you want to be able to sell, a good chunk of that in order to, like, number one, make it like, from an optics point of view, like a good show. And number two, just make it feel big. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, like, this is not like just like a regular arena we're talking about with Globe Life Stadium. This is where the Texas Rangers play. It is a huge baseball stadium, 40,000 seater for baseball. I believe WWE have run similar venues where they've sold like right around there 40,000, 30,000 something tickets. So obviously, like, there's a lot to factor into this, and like it's still going to be a big show if they were to have it at Globe Life Stadium. Now, the presentation of the show, all that kind of stuff, and the build-up is really going to determine it. And I think one thing that fans like really want from AEW is, number one, show that like they are committed to making these shows feel big. And one of the reasons why, like, the original All In, the original All Out, the first few shows that AEW had, like, there was such demand from it. If there was a stadium available, like, for the capacity they needed for the original All Out, AEW probably would have had that in a stadium. Like, they weren't going to do Soldier Field because it's outdoors and the infrastructure to do that would be insane. But if they had the ability to do that, maybe in a dome or something, they could have sold out a dome. That's how big the demand was for the original All Out. And obviously all of that was because of the momentum they had coming out of their summer shows that year, Double or Nothing, all that kind of stuff. So the hype has died down a bit. We can all agree on that. It's died down quite a bit. And they need to figure out how they get people into these shows, how they make AEW must see. And part of the deal with them is they are not in, the public's eye as much as WWE. The best way to counteract that is by marketing the shit out of your events in these local areas. And I can tell you, they've come out to DC, they've come out to Baltimore. It used to be the case where when they were coming, you would know. And I've seen this when they were in New York, too, because I frequently go to New York. And you would know that AEW is in town. You would know that, like, these big, like, shows were happening. And now I think that there's significantly less focus on that. And look no further than Arthur Ashe. I'm going to use them as an example because that show, there is no reason why AEW should only have an advance of 3,000. You can say that, well, if they get to like 8,000, they get to 9,000, whatever. It is still bad that they only have an advance of 3,000 in a market as strong as New York. Like, all Out right now has a good advance, I would say, and they're around like 5,600 according to WrestleTix. Like, that's a good advance, but still, like, we're getting closer and closer, and these tickets need to start moving. So, point is, I think AEW really, and I've been saying this for a while, really needs to hone in on the marketing in these local markets. They're doing a better job of it. They're sending talent out in advance of All In. I think you need to be doing it sooner. I think you need to be doing it more, and I understand. Like, hopefully, when this deal goes through and they re-sign with Warner Brothers Discovery, that budget for marketing is going to go up, and look for them to hopefully, again, this is me just guessing basically, but I would think that marketing would be a massive deal for them moving forward because they have to do that in order to compete, especially at the level where they were in 2021. So we'll see what happens here. Obviously, a lot of hype about this potential stadium show, but we'll see if they can actually do it. How many seats do you think they can fill in that stadium show? I know a lot of you are going to be like, they're going to sell 1,000 in a stadium. It's going to be fine. But look, this is also a company that for another stadium show that's happening in a few weeks, sold 45,000, likely going to have 50,000 by the time they hit the bell ringing in Wembley at All In. So we'll see. By the way, I'm going to be at All In. So if you're going, come say hi or hit me up, whatever. We'll work it out. But I'm really excited for that. Guys, let me know in the comment section, though, what you guys think of all of this. Be sure to hit that like button as well. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released.